Hello again and welcome to Pick Yourself, the podcast that helps you build a meaningful electronic music career. If your goal is to create and release outstanding music on respected labels, get better bookings and grow a tribe of true fans instead of just social followers, then this show is for you. My name is Philip, thanks for tuning in, and now let's get right into today's episode. Welcome to episode 52 of Pick Yourself. I'm super excited to have you here with me again. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for sharing this show with your friends. Our numbers are growing significantly, so that has to do with you guys recommending it again and again to your peers. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. That's the thing that builds communities. So yeah, thank you so much. Today's episode is a very cool one with an artist who's my guest called Linn Elisabet. Linn is one of the rising figures in Berlin's techno scene, but actually much more than that. Linn is creating music with a mission, and that is something that I can relate to quite a bit. Maybe that comes from my background in the punk rock and hardcore scene, but actually I love it when artists have something to say and, as it's the case with Linn Elisabet, also start their own label. In this case, the label is called Acts of Rebellion, and I would love for you to check it out. And beyond that, Linn has taken the time and effort to put together an amazing guest post for us at pickyourself.com. I would love for you to check it out. It talks about a very interesting and maybe not too common subject called intersectional equity and what that means for upcoming artists. So if that has sparked your curiosity now, go to pickyourself.com and check out Linn Elisabet's guest post. So without further ado, let's jump into my conversation with Linn Elisabet. Okay, Linn, welcome to the show. So great to have you here. How has your week been so far?
Yeah, well, it is way too common for me to say it's been intense, but I'm going to say it again.
Okay. What you've been up to recently?
Right now I'm working on a collaboration with a spoken word artist who I'm producing an EP for, and that's been taking not only a lot of my work time but also a lot of my mental time because I'm just walking around thinking about it all the time. Super excited to have it finished and uncover it for the world.
Nice. Is that gonna come out on your own label?
Indeed it will, yes.
Oh.
At least that's what we plan. So
very cool, very excited. Yeah, share this with me. I'm super pumped to listen to that stuff. I've seen more of these collaborations lately of spoken word and electronic music. I think there's something very interesting in that. Overall, talking about collaborations, is that something that you're particularly interested in?
I think this collab thing is quite new for me. I am a single child and I have been used to doing everything by myself, and this was also how I got started. So it's only the past 1 or 2 years that I've actually been reaching out to others and working together with them, and it's something that I indeed want to do more because I've realized how much I can grow from it. But it is, to me, super important that it is a very precise fit, both creatively and personally for it to work out.
Nice. Well, that's a perfect segue. You told us that you grew up as a single child and you weren't used to that collaboration approach. So give us a little bit of background about yourself. How did you find music, first of all, and how did it evolve into doing the thing that you're doing today?
It's a long story. I'm going to try to make it a bit more concise. But yeah, the music it's been around. My dad used to tell me this story about how when I was 1 year old and I had a difficult time sleeping, he would shake me to a massive attack.
Wow.
That was the only thing that could make me sleep. So I'm guessing the electronic music came in somewhere around there. But how it took form in terms of expression, it was through singing. So yeah, I was singing and I also started playing cello as a child, and mainly I was practicing in choir and in orchestras. And by time I felt very comfortable just hiding in that collective,
I get it. Totally understand.
I had a voice among other voices. But as everything unfolded, I started coming into like electronic music, and I realized like, okay, I actually have a voice of my own. And that's like how it all just kicked off, I guess.
Okay. And did electronic music find you in some way? Like, did a friend, for example, introduce you to producing or DJing? Or did you stumble upon this kind of music by yourself, finding out like, yeah, I really want to do this myself instead of singing? How did that happen?
It's funny that you're asking this because I had the chance to start out much earlier than I did. I had a good friend, his name was Oscar. And when we were like in our late teens, we were spending all time together. I was basically like living at his place. And he was making music in Fruity Loops back then. And he was like trying to show me stuff and like wanted to make music with me. And I was so uninterested. I'm not sure why, but maybe I was just thinking that I couldn't do it, that it wasn't for me. And he also like tried to have me coming with him to like forest raves and stuff. And I was like, no, what's that? So it could have started for me already at like 16 or 17, but I was in another realm back then when it came to music. And then when I went to my first rave, that was when everything happened.
Oh, wow.
But that wasn't until I was like 20 or something.
Okay. And how was that experience of going to a rave for the first time? What did it evoke in you that made you really want to produce that music?
For me, this one first time, like, I'm gonna say this, but when we were younger, we were partying a lot. We were this group. It was me and 4 other girls mainly who were going to the clubs in Stockholm. And these were like commercial clubs or indie pop clubs. And everything was so much about attention. And I never really considered whether I wanted that attention or not. I just looked for it because it felt like that was what you were supposed to do, right?
Interesting.
And then at this time I was writing for a music business newsletter. And there was this guy who was part of starting one of the first big techno clubs in Stockholm Docklands in like the late 80s, early 90s. They were celebrating some kind of anniversary, and I was supposed to interview him. And he told me about this like secret underground world. And I was just so captured by this story that when we had turned off the camera, he asked me like, okay, do you want to come? And I was like, yes, of course I want to come. I have to try this. And we got an address just like a couple of hours before it started. And it was like in the middle of nowhere, like far outside Stockholm in the suburbs. And we were just walking and we didn't really know exactly where to go. And you're like looking for that sound and we find it and we like follow the rhythms. And when we come in there, it was just like entering another world. And on top of all of this, there was this girl playing. And she had, so her name is Sara Lego. She's playing under Lego, Swedish DJ. And her energy was so intense. And I was so captured both by the music and like by her vibe and her expression. And I remember already then I was like, wow, I want to do this too. Because this evening, I had no need for attention from anyone else. I just danced. And no one even tried to, make a move on me or anything. I was left alone to do what I wanted to do. And it was also the first night I had been out partying where I was like 100% sober. We weren't drinking anything. And still it was the single one most intense and fantastic experience that I've had on a dance floor. So already then I was like, yeah, I want to do this too, not only to do it, but to share that feeling with someone else. And I think it was for my benefit that she was the particular person who was playing at that time.
Okay, tell me more. I'm interested. Like, what was that aspect?
Well, seeing someone who is somewhat like you.
Mm-hmm.
doing something that you never considered before that you could do.
Okay.
There is something that happens when you do this, like when you see this. And I also, back then, I wouldn't have made that connection. But like venturing into this and being very often the only person of my kind in the room, it just makes it so much more difficult and challenging to be that one person.
Yeah.
So I'm very happy that she was the person who was playing that night.
Nice.
It was meant to be.
That sounds like a absolutely pivotal moment in your life and also in your music career. So did that also give you the confidence, that self-belief that you can do something like this? Seeing her on there?
I mean, subconsciously, yes. The thing with me is that I would say that I'm fairly confident, or at least that I'm like stable in what I'm doing and like how I relate to it. But how I've started on things, on missions or on projects, it's never been about like the conscious thought of me being like, oh, I could do this. It's just like I get an impulse and I do it. And that consideration of confidence is just something that comes afterwards. And then I'm often like kind of surprised. They're like, okay, wait, what? Did I do this?
Nice.
But while doing it, it just happens.
Yeah, but that's the start before you're ready mentality that I absolutely swear by as well. Because we can wait forever to gain the confidence to do certain things. Or we just do these things and then look back at it and find out, yeah, I mean, I was probably not ready to do this, but I did it anyway. I stumbled upon a few things. I had to overcome certain obstacles, but here I am now and I've deserved to be here. That's better compared to just asking yourself if you're already worth of doing something, if you're already ready to do something.
Yeah, because then you're always going to say no.
Exactly. Yeah, it's that little nagging voice in the back of your head.
Yeah, no, I think there is no such thing as the right time to do something. I think we have to learn just to do. And then, I mean, of course, patience is an important part of being successful in this type of fields. But for many people, I think that this patience or like waiting for the right moment can just become like a way too big thing that just holds people back from doing what they want to do.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's also a form of procrastination, I think.
Yeah. I mean, pouring your heart out there is like you're gonna find all the excuses not to do it, I guess, if you're not used to it.
Yeah, one of the interesting thoughts that I always go back to when talking about this fear of what's going to happen and how you're going to do things is you always have to balance that fear with the regret of not doing it and then looking back at it and not having done it. So I think we always discount things in the future just because of that fear that holds us back, but we always forget about the regret that we're going to face if we don't do it.
Right.
Cool. So let's fast forward a little bit. So you developed your first songs, you started producing your own music. At what point did you find out that you actually want to pursue a career in music?
For me, it wasn't really a choice. It was also something that just happened. So before I started making my own music, like I told you, I was writing for this music business paper, and it was because I was working on the business side for a few years, mainly with like communication for some indie labels in Stockholm. And I had a burnout.
Oh, wow.
Yes, and the only thing that I could do back then was to make music. I mean, I was forced on sick leave by my doctors. But the Swedish health insurance, like, they didn't approve it. They didn't. This is very common in Sweden when it comes to like mental health issues and burnouts, that they want like more proof that you actually can't work. And often like a doctor's note isn't enough. And in my case, it wasn't. So I signed up for art school. And it was a type of art school that doesn't like have any grades or anything. It was just like you apply with your creative project, And if they see the potential in you and that you also would be like a good fit for the methods that they are using in this particular school, then they take you in and you can be there for like 1 or 2 years. And I was there for 2 years while recovering from my burnout. And I mean, now in retrospect, I'm very happy that it happened, because I'm not sure if I had allowed myself to pursue that if it wasn't like that I didn't have a choice.
Wow, that's a super interesting story. So this burnout thing, that is obviously something that can happen in the music as well. How do you protect yourself from the same thing happening again to you with your music career, which is also like big financial pressure at times? And yeah, very hard times also during a phase like right now where we're facing this global pandemic crisis.
I've been on sick leave for burnout twice, but I've also received very good healthcare for it. And during this like kind of stress rehabilitation that I was in for 2.5 years actually, so it was quite a long time and quite a lot of work behind it, I felt like I found my tempo and my tools of coping with things. And I mean, I'm still sensitive to stress, no doubt, but I have become a lot better at reading my body and not only my mind, because often the body tells you, or at least in my case, the body tells me things before the mind actually speaks about it. And to become really good at pulling the brake and say no, which is very difficult if you're a people pleaser, but
Absolutely.
to say no. And I think this became also a lot easier over time as I also like refined and developed my kind of, I don't really like the word brand or image, but I mean, well, let's use it because people will understand. But once you have a niche and a direction, let's say that, it's going to be easier also to say no to things, because it's going to be very particular things that you want to do. And in the beginning, I would just say yes to anything just because I wanted to have the opportunity and the chance to be part of something. But I couldn't really evaluate what I wanted to be a part of.
Yeah, I think that makes total sense. And it's also okay in the beginning. So I think that no one starts out with a perfect plan, knowing their exact niche and has the ability to say no to certain things. I think this experience of being overwhelmed with choices and opportunities and also different paths that you can take, that's just part of the learning process and of the growth process as an artist. And you have to develop and build that skill of saying no, develop that skill of confronting yourself with a question again and again, like, who do I choose to be?
I think that was an important part of it, to like go and do that gig with other DJs that actually play another subgenre than yourself and realize like, okay, this is no fun, even though it's the coolest club in Stockholm or whatever, you know?
Yeah.
So like, no, I actually don't want to do this again.
Yeah, totally. Talking about your development as an artist and also developing your style and building something like an authentic and honest artist brand, there must have been some point in your career or some process in your career where you were able to hone down on your style and on your presentation and everything. How did that happen? This moment of niching down, I would say, in your sound and also in your artist brand overall.
This is also something that happens over time, of course. I think it happened though when I started understanding what I was doing. Like the first pieces that I made and also the first pieces that I released, I'm not saying in any way that they are not good enough, but I just did them and I didn't really have a thought behind them. I was just playing around, and I was also I had very clear references in terms of which producers that I wanted to sound like, and I think this is a very important stage of your development, because when you're learning something, you need to imitate others at first before you can take yourself more freedom and just use all of those tools that you learned through imitation to create something that is your own. And releasing music was also a really important part of that, I think. The first release I had where I felt like this kind of set the starting point for the sound that I kept building on. It was the tracks that I signed and released 2019 on Arts.
Mm-hmm.
And also partially the first release I did on Planet Rhythm. Because that's when I started to integrate my vocals.
Nice.
But they are very, very shy in those productions. I'm telling you, might not even hear them if you don't know that they're there. And by over time, I've just tried to allow myself to push it forward more and more. And that became like the central point, not only of my sound, but also of the way that I am composing, which also informs the rest of the structure, I suppose.
Okay, Linn, one of the things that I always stress about in my podcasts and my blog posts is the idea of investing in yourself as an artist, because a lot of people come to me thinking about, for example, maybe getting a professional master, a professional mix, or maybe hire me for coaching or something. But they're always having this thought in the back of your head, yeah, but I'm not earning money with my music yet. How does that turn out? Should I really invest money from my day job? Should I really invest that much time into building certain skills? But I've seen you invest heavily in education, in getting better at things. So what's your perspective on that?
If we're going to look at it as a business, because if we're talking about money, then it has to be some type of business. And there are no other businesses that you start without making an investment. And this should be motivating enough because we're probably also very passionate about music. So it's a good business investment to make that comes with you being allowed to pursue your passion. And I've poured my heart into this, both in terms of emotion, but also time and financial means. Every little thing that I could spare has gone into this. And still, I haven't had the resources to actually have a really nice studio set up until about 1 or 2 years ago. But I'm happy about that, because having no financial means in the beginning had me I had to become really, really good at Ableton or Ableton Live, which would be applicable to any other DAW that someone might work in. But I mean, sometimes, and this is something that I'm trying to tell my students, because I'm also teaching, that you don't need to have the most fancy and expensive stuff. You can make music only on your computer, and if you get really good at your tools, then that's going to be just fine. No one is going to know. My first vocals are recorded with an iPhone microphone. And they are so heavily processed that they sound really good anyway. But when there is time, then, or when the time comes that you have financial means, I definitely think that it's a good investment, both in your soul and in your potential business.
Okay, and is it better, do you think, first of all, investing in education, or is it more important to invest in getting proper tools?
I think that depends on what type of person you are. Some people learn really well from, maybe you have a good network where you can learn things, or you can learn a lot by yourself on YouTube. Really you can. Some people need someone to hold your hand. And then also through education, I have experienced that you get quite a lot of help with facilitating your creative process, which is probably the most difficult part of it all, because anyone can learn how to navigate a computer program. But being in touch with your own creative spirit can be really difficult at times, even for someone who is very experienced. So I have chosen to spend a lot on education, but I also love going to school, real study head.
Nice. Yeah, for me, it's actually the same thing. I'm investing several €1,000 every year into getting better at certain things and getting education. And I found that this gives you a way better return on investment than most of the tools that you can buy. And also, I have this mindset of you have to deserve to buy a certain tool. Do you know what I mean? So you have to, first of all, get good, and then you deserve to make a level up in the tools you use.
Yeah, it wouldn't make any sense to have certain tools if you don't know how to use them. And I also think And we were talking about this at some other point too, that leveling up in gear can give you confidence. But I think also that like if you're leveling up too hard, that might just make you scared and have the completely opposite effect. So finding this good balance of like how far outside my comfort zone am I going to move in order to gain that confidence that will translate into my work. I think that is a balance that is worth like feeling and finding out.
Absolutely. Yeah, one good example to illustrate this is studio monitors, actually. So I've started out with the shittiest monitors you can get, which is the KRK Rocket 8, I think was the first model that I had. And I mean, back then I wouldn't have been able to tell the difference between a 500 euro monitor and 800 and 1500. So they were all sounding pretty similar at that point. Maybe some of them had like a little bit more clarity in the top end, but I wouldn't be able to really tell that difference. So it's okay to start out with something a little bit more shitty in the beginning and then train your critical listening skills, get better at producing, mixing and mastering, and then you deserve to step up your game, buy one level of more expensive monitors, and then you suddenly hear the difference and you look back at like, how was I able to work on these shit cans for so many years? And yeah, that happens again and again. I mean, even right now, I'm already working with a pretty good setup here. And still, this is the point where I know that, hey, right now, I'm ready to make the next move to a new pair of monitors. And then it's probably going to take another 5 or 10 years until I make the next move. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's really important for just everyone to allow oneself to consider what is right for me. There is no one right way to go. And from my experience and the people that I have had around me that inspired me the most, there has been no fancy gear involved.
Yeah.
And for some people, that might not even be important. And then that's completely fine. Like a good example is I have 2 Technics turntables. I've had them for 2 years. And I decided when I got them that I'm going to get really good at DJing vinyl. And now I'm going to say something that is like super controversial, but I'm standing up for this, really. So I've had them for 2 years. Can I DJ vinyl properly? No. And why can't I do that? Like, why can't I do that? So I tried to turn this over in my head for a while. And then I was like, okay, I don't want to do it.
Yeah.
I don't want to do it. And I thought that I had to do it in order to be a DJ. Because else, like, people would be like, oh, this is not a real DJ. And then I was like, no, I'm playing 3 or 4 decks and I'm looping and layering and that's my thing. So now I'm going to sell one of them.
I'm so thankful that you mentioned this. Because honestly, if you were just playing with even just 2 decks that would not even be the original CDJs, but some kind of fake brand. Or even if you were just working from your computer, triggering Ableton loops or maybe using Tractor or whatever it is, like it really doesn't matter as long as what you want to express does translate to the dance floor. I think that's the most important thing. And whatever the means are that you're trying and that you're using to achieve this creative goal, that's fine. Just put off this pressure, this immense pressure of expectations of what you're supposed to be doing or not doing in terms of setup and tools and so on.
Yeah, and I think the most important thing to consider first of all is like, what is it that I want to say? And what is the way that is giving me most joy to say it? And then we can start thinking about like, okay, do I want to buy these super expensive technical items or not?
Yeah, totally. And I also feel that sometimes like talking about these gear things and workflows and so on, and whether you use, beat grid and whatever modern tools are available for beat matching and so on, and whether you use vinyl or not, I think a lot of that is also a very hypocritical discussion and a bit of a snobby elite thing also, that to me always sounds like you're essentially protecting yourself from critique by ticking all the boxes, basically, by using exactly the setup that has been around for a certain while and doing it exactly in the way that a lot of magazines tell you to do or a lot of famous DJs tell you to do in interviews. And I think it's healthy to question these standards.
Definitely. And like now I'm going to make myself really vulnerable by saying this, but being somewhat marginalized in this industry, I have certainly felt the pressure that I have to tick all of those boxes more than anyone else, because I'm telling you, like, I have to prove 3 times more than some other people that I am, like, that I have deserved a seat by the table. And like, I keep getting questioned. And then I look at other people who didn't have to pay that type of effort. But now I'm not going to do that anymore. Now I'm going to do what I want to do. And that's that. Like, that's the year's promise.
And that is also quite a relieving feeling, I think.
Yeah, and a good way to save energy, definitely.
I would love for you to give us a little look behind the scenes. This is stuff that is super valuable and interesting to my listeners here. How does it happen that you move up the ladder to release on one of the more respected labels, like, for example, Arts or Planet Rhythm? Is it really, as most people assume, is it just because you are friends and you've been hanging out backstage, and then at some point it happens that you get to submit your tracks and they like it because you're their friend or something? Or did you just apply out of the blue and they just liked your tracks? Guide us through the process. How was that for you?
Yeah, so I had a bunch of music that I knew that I wanted to release, and I had already done various artists and an EP on a local label in Stockholm, and I could have kept releasing with them if I wanted to, and I could have done some kind of run through of the people that I had partied with or whatever, and pitch my music to them, but I didn't. I had no connection whatsoever to the people who signed those tracks before. I just made a list. I'm a fan of Excel sheets. There is
Perfect.
this saying that, like, you know, you can't be creative and organized at the same time. That's bullshit, because
I love that you're saying that. It's what I keep on preaching.
But I made an extensive Excel sheet that I'm still using, actually, with labels. So it's like labeled names and link to their SoundCloud, which artists they've been releasing, what kind of style, and then contacts. And then I just started sending demos, and I tried to tailor it a little bit so that, like, okay, I'm sending to this label, they'll probably be more interested in these type of tracks. And I was also trying to be like very, okay, I'm going to research this. Who is the label manager here? What is the name of them? What music have they released before? So I can make a reference to that in the email. Like, I wanted them to be sure that I wasn't just like shooting into the darkness and to see what happened. I wanted them to know that I was eager to be with their label. But I can say I had to pitch for a while before someone took the bait, and this is still happening.
Absolutely.
If I'm reaching out to people that I don't know, I count on having to send to like 15 or 20 labels before someone says yes. But I pitched my music to Planet Rhythm, and the guy there also happens to be part owner in Arts. So I didn't actually pitch to Arts. He just sent it to Emmanuel without asking me. And then
Nice.
I got an email back and like, do you want to have this on vinyl? And I was like, yes.
Oh, perfect.
But it was a lot of work behind it, but it didn't really turn out as I expected. I was just expecting a digital release somewhere, you know.
Nice.
So that was fortunate.
Yeah, I think it's well-deserved because you did the right things. And just let me summarize that for our audience, please. I think there are so many great takeaways just from the process of you describing on how you applied for labels, because that bullshit of you just have to have a big network and you have to know all the people and be friends with everyone in the scene to get releases on respected labels. That is just plain bullshit. You have to have great music and you have to send it to the right people at the right time in a very personalized way. And this is exactly what you did. I assume you don't have a list of 200 labels. You maybe have a list of 20 to 30 labels that you would be interested in. You did a lot of research going into these label profiles and looking what artists they've been releasing. And you made a reference to that in your email even. So they just noticed that you actually care about releasing on exactly their specific label and not just any label. And you're not just waiting for the name to be connected to you.
And I think that is important to keep in mind. Also, like as a person who is running a label managers also have a vision for their work. And some of them might not even be producers, but this is their way of expressing something within the culture that they love. And then it's super important to try and understand what that vision is and be like, okay, do we share this vision at all points, or at least like at some points, and then show like, yes, this is what we share. This is why we should work together.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a perfect segue to talk a little bit about your label. So how does it happen that someone who already has a foot in the door with labels like Arts or Planet Rhythm, why the hell would you want to start your own label like you did with Acts of Rebellion?
This also has several reasons. First of all, I just being creative without having someone telling you how to be creative is a great thing. And although I understand as a label manager how it is to give feedback to an artist so that they work with in terms of your vision, like sometimes there are visions that are mine and mine only, and I want to perform them fully, like to the full extent that I envision them to be performed. So the advantage of creative freedom is one of them. But then also, once you've entered enough spaces which you feel like you are perfectly made for, only to realize that those spaces might not be made for you, something just has to be done. And this ties back to the social justice agenda that I am signing up for. Yeah, creating that label was just me making another space where I could do whatever I wanted, however I wanted, with whomever I wanted, not having to worry about discrimination. Because that's reality. Like I've had that too. I was fortunate with the Planet Rhythm and Arts releases, but I've had other instances and communications with labels where I have not been that lucky in terms of respectful behavior.
Okay.
So that was the triggering point, actually.
Get it. So if I understand correctly, two driving factors between starting your own label. The one was creative freedom, like the maximum creative freedom. And the other aspect is, some socio-political cause that you stand behind. And maybe you want to dive into that a little bit and tell us, what is that cause? Why is it important to you? And how does it manifest itself in the label work?
To start out, it was for me, like for me only. And sure, people can call that egocentric, but there must be a space for a person like me to get to do what I want to do without having to think about all of this stuff. And once I had done a release and a campaign around that I felt both proud of, but also relieved not to have to fight these social frictions that happen in subtle discrimination, I was like, okay, but I can expand this and try and give this to others too. So for the future, like I'm open to releasing other people who need that type of space too. We have done various artists, but I would like to start looking at like solo projects and just create this type of family that maybe I felt that I have lacked. And it's not even political. It's just life.
Okay. So, in other words, do you mean that there is some kind of safe space missing in, just the label world for people like you who want to release music? Is that something that you try to offer?
Yes, definitely. And now that we have such a democratized kind of landscape where anyone can create a label and release however they want, I would also encourage other people to do that as well. There are plenty of perfectly awesome and fine people out there to work with, but every now and then you're gonna stumble upon one of the assholes. And then it's nice to have the option to just fall back upon this platform which you can govern 100% yourself and call all the shots. in terms of collaborations, and yeah, it's
Get it.
the best thing I ever did, I think.
Okay, so you've started your own label on the one hand out of the pursuit of creative freedom, and on the other hand, you had this like very important socio-political matter that drives you and is part of your identity. Can you tell us a little bit more, like, how can something be so meaningful that you actually put it into your creative work and into your work as a label manager?
I have a good friend whose name is Ambrose, and they, in this kind of case, would say, like, this is the hill that I chose. Everything is just so interwoven with each other, and we could actually like take it back to that story about the first time that I came to a rave. Why was I so relieved by not asking for attention? Or why was I so relieved that no one tried to make a move on me? This is our lives, and this is how our lives unfold, where we have to adjust and suppress and make choices that comply to expectations. And I carried that for such a long time, and I'm still carrying that burden. Like, even though I've taken myself the time and the struggle to fight with that, both internally and externally. But I guess it all started with just Linn Elisabet as a person in my life, or a creative outlet.
Mm-hmm.
I realized that I wasn't only suffering from the expectations that society put upon me because I was a woman. I was also suffering from the expectations that society put upon me because they expected me to be a woman because of the body that I was born in.
Mm-hmm.
And as it turned out, I was, through techno culture, exposed to the alternative that gender is something that we have learned by time. It's not something that we're born into. And this option that I never thought was an option before just opened so many doors that were fantastic and daunting at the same time. And that journey was channeled through my music, and still is channeled through my music. And then I started thinking a lot about, like, okay, this is creative liberation, this is individual liberation. And in terms of intersectional equity, there are other things that people can identify with as well. The things that make us all different often trickle down into the same type of struggle, where we feel like we don't have a place in this world to be who we are. And that kind of stirs both a deep grief in me,
Mm-hmm.
but also great excitement, because I am so amazed by what I can be and what other people can be, and how this can be expressed and like brought into the world in different ways. So if I allowed myself to do that, then the natural thing for me would also be to encourage others to do that. And that wouldn't only be like in good favor for someone else, because this would feed back into my journey and my personal development too. And so all of this just comes together in my music, in the label, and its mission, still ever evolving. I don't know where it's going to take me and where it's going to hopefully take someone else. But to me, that is everything. People being allowed to be, that is everything.
Yeah. Thanks so much for sharing this. I think for sure some of the people listening to this right now have been waiting for exactly this story to be told, and to have some kind of role model in this scene that they can identify with and see, like, okay, others have chosen this path of really questioning the concept of identity and seeing it from a different perspective and feeling the sort of liberation that you were talking about. So I think we need more of that. I definitely think we need as much as possible in this scene, because it originally came from a very diverse place where your specific identity didn't matter so much, but it's still facing the same threats that society is putting on underground culture forever. And it's finding its way into this scene as well, and it has been there forever. But then I find a lot of hope in the small labels and like the underground artists that start to put a mission like this on a banner, running out there, starting this thing, and basically bringing this message to the people and giving them a chance to look up to this and identify with that. Yeah, so thanks a lot for putting this out here. I think it's super valuable.
Yeah, doing something as privileged as music, because not everyone gets to do that. It feels like one should use that privilege to give back in some way.
Absolutely. Okay, so you've talked about this concept of intersectional equity that is really important to you. Now, you have contributed to the Pick Yourself blog with a little article about this, explaining what that is and also what that has in consequence for people who are, I would say, the victims of oppression in that sense, and also the people who are bystanders. What can they do? We're not going to talk about the whole article, but maybe you can give people a short idea of what you mean with intersectional equity, because that concept is not clear to everyone.
So intersectional equity would consist of the two words intersectional and equity. And intersectionality basically means it's the notion of, like, some people might be discriminated not only because of one ground of discrimination, but of several. And that the more of these intersections of different grounds of discriminations that you are exposed to, the rougher it gets. And we all also have like different types of privileges in different areas, which we need to be aware of, and also like how to support the people who are marginalized in another area than we are ourselves. And then equity, which sounds very similar to equality, is the idea of not only treating everyone the same, but giving everyone the same chance, which would mean, like, if we have a race and there's one person who starts a few seconds before, the other one is obviously going to be behind. And we have to make sure that we all have the same starting point. And at this point, based on the grounds of discrimination, we all don't have the same advantage. We all don't start at the same time in the race.
Get it. That's a very, very good explanation of that, very vivid. How does that overall concept of intersectional equity and your socio-political work, how does that translate into the label itself, like the artists that you choose, the releases that you do? How does it manifest itself?
To me, it's super important to have a diverse roster. And I'm trying to consider as many variables as possible. Then, of course, I want to know that the people who are involved share that kind of value with me, and that the music somehow channels their uniqueness in that sense. So those are like the three things that I'm looking at mainly if I'm working with others. And this is not only other producers, but when it comes to like other type of collaborators too, super important.
Okay, so people listening to this might now be wondering, how the hell should I start a label? It feels like a super overwhelming and daunting project. How did you do this, and what is your recommendation for people?
So I had the great advantage of having been working on labels before, and I've also been running another label before, although in another genre. So I have been able to do this like full scale from the very first release. But I think the biggest obstacle that most people are facing in this type of project is to just get started. So I would say, like, if you want to do it, then set up a Bandcamp page and just try it out. You can read up and expand by time.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. This this procrastination by perfectionism, people wanting to plan everything ahead before they even get started. This is a huge problem that I'm seeing over and over again. And I mean, you can always take care of things like distribution on a broader scale and also physical products and so on in the next phase. So it's always better to have the first thing out and then move on to the second phase, I would say.
And I mean, the good thing about this also is that maybe then you're not taking that big of economic or financial risk when you're starting out. And then that will also make you feel a little bit more safe and like warm in the clothes. Because like pressing 300 vinyls for the first release is kind of a big risk to take. And then you might not even be able to take that project any further if you don't sell those.
That's a very good point. And how do you make sure now that your label stays, I would say, financially sane and healthy? And how do you also make sure that you have enough time left over for your own music?
Well, let's say it's not perfectly financially sane yet. But I've been lucky the past year to have received some scholarships. And I have chosen to invest it in the label with the hopes of the label becoming financially sane eventually.
Yeah. How do you make sure that you also stay in the creative field and you're not just a label manager?
Right now, I'm just letting the label unfold in a natural kind of manner, because I also created it for the sake of joy. So I'm trying not to plan too much. I've been the type of person who always planned like my life in minute detail for like 10 years ahead. And that cost me burnouts. So I'm not doing that anymore. So I've decided that like this is my storytelling channel that will just unfold in its natural cause. And I mean, it enables me to do my own creative work. So I wouldn't say that they are in conflict with each other in any way.
Get it. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's so cool how these very rough phases in life, for example, the 2 burnouts, still end up in the massive growth opportunity that you're seeing right now. For me, it was quite similar actually. So by facing a really severe depression and also getting some treatment on anxiety disorder was one of the most important phases of my life. And I'm sure that it's one of the main reasons why I had the guts, for example, to go full-time into running a studio, into moving to Berlin, into starting a family, all these like big decisions that have happened in my life in the last years. A lot of that confidence came from working through those really hard times before. And yeah, I couldn't be more thankful actually for that experience, as hard as it was and as hard as it sounds. When looking back at it, it still was totally worth it in a way.
Yeah, I'm trying to think like this too, especially like tying it back to the challenges that we've been talking about, both in terms of mental health, but also in terms of discrimination. Like I can look back now that I've dealt with these things and thank my challengers. All of those who might have tried to silence me or shut me down in any way, they've just fed this monster.
Perfect.
And I mean, it's going to happen again, and it's never pleasant when it happens. It's actually really devastating. And sometimes I'm just like, why can't I just be left to my own devices? But in the end, I can look back at it and be like, haha, I won.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think now the facts definitely speak in favor of you. So you're running a label that is putting out fantastic music. You have had some really successful releases on other labels. You are an established artist, I would say, right now in the Berlin underground scene. And yeah, also I think you're taking a lot of very clever steps from an artist career perspective, because you're doing one thing at a time. It doesn't sound to me as if you're trying to do all the things at once. It sounds to me like you're definitely taking your time to make the right moves. And this is something that's really rare, because once people have their first successful releases, they really think they have to do everything and all at once.
I think that it also comes out of necessity. Like I couldn't do it, because then I would get into trouble. But then it's also like I'm not of course I want acknowledgement, and of course I want as many people as possible to like hear and understand what I am doing and what I'm trying to say. But the drive only comes from like there are things in here and they need to get out. So there's never really been any motivation for me to do things just because it would be beneficial for my career in that sense. I just need to say and scream out these things, and then if many people hear it, then I'm happy.
Definitely. Now, I think that's a great moment to shout out some things that you would tell your former self. Like, say, you can talk now to the Linn from 20 years ago or something. What would you say that person if you were their mentor?
Oh, wow. That's a lovely thought. I've been doing some meditations on this, actually. I think the first thing I would say would be like there's definitely no one else out there who is going to be able to define who you are. No one is going to be able to tell you who you are. And as cheesy as it might sound, I think it's something that people, and even I, still need to hear, because we have been so trained into valuing the wrong things, like likes and cred and looks, and that it somehow would say anything about who we are and what value we have in the world. And it's a reminder that I think everyone needs again and again.
That is super powerful. Yeah. Cool. Perfect. Now let's bring this back home. Where can people find out a little bit more about you and about the label, and what is up next? That is also something that I'm super curious about.
So up next, we have this collaboration with the spoken word artist Roa. It's the single one project I think that I've been the most excited about uncovering. So it's going to be a lot of fun to keep working on this. And then I have an EP on Vincent Neumann's label, Unitas Multiplex, coming out later this year. Where to find more about me? Well, I am on most of your streaming services. If you search for Linn Elisabet on social media, I'm also going to appear. Then, of course, we have Acts of Rebellion, actsofrebellion.se and actsofrebellion.bandcamp.com.
Nice. Perfect. Thank you so much. And for everyone who wants to find out a little bit more about the concept of intersectional equity and the things that Linn shared with us, just go to pickyourself.com. I'm really thankful that you took the time to write this piece. It turned out amazing, I think. And also thank you so much for the conversation. It was an absolute pleasure having you over here.
Thank you. And thank you for having me.
So that was my conversation with Linn Elisabet. I hope you enjoyed it just as much as I did. And if you want to find out more about intersectional equity and things that are connected to Linn's mission, then I encourage you to go to pickyourself.com and check out Linn's amazing guest post on that topic. So that is it for this episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. I will be back with more interesting guests and more topics to talk about. But until then, I encourage you to also check out the YouTube channel of Pick Yourself. I've been a bit more active there. I've made videos in which I'm answering people's questions. So just check that out. Go to YouTube and look up Pick Yourself and you will find me. Until then, bye-bye. If you don't want to miss any of the upcoming episodes, please make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast app. And you can find detailed blog posts for every single episode on pickyourselfpodcast.com. Until then, see you next time.